Coming up on Mississippi Roads, we visit the Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum in Biloxi, the Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst, and travel to Leland to take a look at the Wildlife Heritage Museum. All that coming up now on Mississippi Roads.
Down Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Hi, welcome to Mississippi Roads. I'm Walt Grayson. You know, over the years, we've done a lot of stories about museums in Mississippi, everything from small roadside collections up to big federally funded projects. And this week, we want to take another look at museums in Mississippi. And we want to start off with kind of an overview of the kinds of museums that we have here and the types of stories that they tell. Mississippi has never lacked for stories, from the tales and legends handed down from the Native Americans when they built their society here and built their mounds, made their tools, and then left all of it behind for us to find today, to the days of the Europeans when they came here looking for something or trying to get away from something, and they too left their tales of Indian wars and riverboat pirates and highwaymen on the Natchez Trace. Through the Civil War and brother against brother and turning point battles fought here over territory or over control of the railroads, and on, all the way down to us, living and making a living and dying and all the things you have to do all that today. Our jobs and our pastimes, it's a part of the story. And we've kept a journal of it. Well, kind of, not a written journal so much as we have the stuff of life. And it's an illustrated story too. Oh yes, with actual photos and pictures and paintings and things that are here, or paintings created by people from here, and pottery and sculptures and those type illustrations, yes, but other types too. The tools we used, or they used, they illustrate the story. Grandparents and great-grandparents, on back to you don't even know their names, but we've been told their stories, and we have their stuff to remember them by. And where are these illustrations of living and dying? I guess they'd technically be better defined as artifacts. Well, they're in our museums. Little ones, big ones, serious ones with curators and docents, to roadside stops with a fellow in there who'll happily tell you about his collection of fossils that he found in a nearby riverbed or creek bed.
And then the ocean receded.
There's museums that tell the story of when we made steam engines that ran the country, till the country found other ways of running itself. There used to be 1,000 foundries around the country like this one in Meridian, but they were all progressed out of business. Difference is, ours wasn't dismantled and pieced out till nothing was left. Ours was left the way it was. Now it's a museum, and it's still able to tell the story of why it was here and who worked here and how it changed things from before. And it's a good story that you won't find in any books. Well, not exactly like it tells itself in its own museum. And we have lots of museums in Mississippi just like this. For instance, big steam engines ran trains, and they have their stories too. And the glory days of the Illinois Central in Mississippi is physically illustrated at the Macomb Railroad Museum. We have museums that tell the stories of small railroads too. We have stories about boats and the river and the sea and how we grappled with them and choked the living out of them, or made a playground out of them with our yachts. We have all those stories in a scattering of museums in Mississippi. Our music, blues at the Delta Blues Museum at Clarksdale, to the B.B. King Museum in Indianola, to the Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst, all physically illustrate the story of how important the music and the music makers of Mississippi are to the world. The museums all tell stories, bunches of stories, illustrated with the things left behind or created for no matter what reason at the time they were built, but ultimately for us, we who love a good story. Love them enough to turn off the interstate and spend an hour or an afternoon enjoying the kinds of tales you don't get from books, but only from being here and seeing the things for ourselves. Well, the first museum we want to visit has been a staple on the Gulf Coast for years and years. The Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum was totally devastated by Hurricane Katrina, and it came back bigger and better than ever. Let's drop in, see how they're doing.
The Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum originally opened in March of 1986, and at that time, we also started the Biloxi Schooner Project. Our museum was in the original Coast Guard barracks, which was originally built in 1935 here on Point Cadet. And this building actually survived Hurricane Camille. It, of course, was inundated with water, but the building itself survived. Well, when we came here the next day after Katrina, little did we know we were going to see a collapsed building. We were completely devastated. We opened the new museum in August of 2014, so it took us about 9 years. It was tremendously hard. I thought about going into another profession, but once I realized that so many people depended on the museum coming back, this is their history, their heritage, and to a lot of them, their life. This is what they grew up knowing and working in, and they just felt like we definitely needed this museum back to tell their story. When other hurricanes come and destroy some of our antebellum homes or any of our history, we still have the museum to come back to see the artifacts and to learn the stories of our ancestors and all of those working in the seafood industry.
Okay, we're here on the first floor of the Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum. And beside me here is the Ship Island lens. It's a Fenzel lens. It was built in France in the late 1800s and then ended up on Ship Island, guiding the ships in for many years before it ended up here at the museum. The lens was lost and destroyed from the museum during Katrina, and fortunately found, and all the pieces were discovered and then sent down to Florida to be rebuilt. And so we still have it after it was lost and destroyed in the hurricane. So it's a pretty neat piece for us to have here. It's kind of why it's featured right up front.
The museum was in its early stages of design when we found out that we were going to receive the Nydia. She's a 30-foot sloop. She was built back here on Back Bay at Johnson Shipyard. In the late 1800s, she's over 120 years old, and no better place should she be but here in the Maritime Museum. The architect was trying to envision our design, and looking at the Nydia and knowing that we were going to have her as our main focal point, she designed the museum a ship in a bottle. And when you come across the Biloxi Ocean Springs Bridge at night with the blue backlit lights on the Nydia with her sails raised, it looks like she's in the museum sailing. And so that's a great vision and a beautiful gateway into Biloxi when you come across that bridge to see the boat with its sails raised. We are by far one of the oldest cities in the United States. We have so much history and heritage here. We're just a melting pot of cultures. Biloxi became the seafood capital of the world. We had shallow water, of course, and that's how the schooners evolved. Because they were shallow drafted, they were able to seine for shrimp and drudge for oysters using the Biloxi schooner. And then we had the Biloxi skiff that evolved. And of course, they would stand in the skiffs and they would tong for oysters with the oyster rakes. So we have the shallow waters, we have the barrier islands that are protecting all of our wetlands and our sea life. It's just a steaming ground for seafood.
So we're here on the second floor of the Maritime and Seafood Industry Museum. Behind me is the J.M. Lapierre shrimp peeling machine, which was invented by J.M. in 1947 and used to peel shrimp. It took the place of tons of workers because it can peel up to 1,000 pounds of shrimp per hour, which you can imagine how many folks it would take to do that by hand. So it took a lot of jobs, but it revolutionized the industry and allowed us to produce and pack up a lot of shrimp and get them out of here. J.M. was 15 years old when he invented this, and I think his father asked, hey, we need to peel shrimp faster. And the idea came from him stepping on a shrimp with his boot and, it just kind of would squeeze out, just like you're squeezing it with your finger. So the machine runs the shrimp back and forth on those rollers and all the way down and just kind of squeezes them out, gets the heads off, and by the time it's at the bottom, it's a clean, deveined shrimp ready to eat.
Our visitors are a lot of locals. We have a lot of school groups that come and tour the museum. And then, of course, we have all of the tourists. that come and visit. They want to know about our history, our heritage, the seafood industry, and the maritime history. So we start with the Indians when they first arrived, and then we go up to the present day. So it kind of gives you an overview for the locals as well as the tourists, a complete picture of what Biloxi is all about.
Behind me here, we have the Kosovich Wheelhouse, which was built at the Kosovich Shipyard, just right down the street here in Back Bay, Biloxi. This one would have been on the Doris Catherine boat. Just not enough room in there for a place to sleep, the throttle and a wheel. So just something for shelter and for the single fisherman to get out of the weather and take a nap. Then behind the wheelhouse over here, we have our Hurricane Gallery, which just talks about all the major storms through the history of Biloxi. You can look at before and after pictures from Camille, Katrina, and just see the things that were there that just are not anymore. Right here on the point, this building was completely destroyed and rebuilt after Katrina, and you see that all along the beachfront. And we're really just now starting to come back from 13 years ago. So it was a big impact, and I think as you go through the history of the city and the coast, and it's something that's really well covered throughout the museum, our ability to come back from destruction has really been amazing. Just one thing after another wipes us out, and then we come right back. From oil spills to hurricanes to depression, doesn't matter. You know, the coast is strong, and here we are.
We've actually been to this next museum. We visited there briefly in a recent show, and although it's not all that old, it tells an important part of the Mississippi story. So let's go to Hazelhurst and find out about the important impact that Mississippi musicians have had on the world as we visit the Mississippi Music Museum.
The Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst, which is at the train depot, it's a quaint museum. People love to go in there because there's so much to look at.
I love the videos that are placed strategically around the building that just is so informative. It allows you to see the true talent that we have here in Mississippi, and it's just a gem to have here in Hazelhurst.
It's a great honor that this town has, what we call our little music town. And so we're just thankful to have it, and it brings in a lot of tourism here.
Since we have gotten the signs out on the interstate, we've had a great increase in the number of visitors that we've had. We feel like that's letting other people know that we are here and bringing visitors here, and people who are traveling, particularly going from New Orleans to Memphis or vice versa, that we're a good stop along the way. We've had people in from all over the world.
It's just an honor to be able to have people to come to our town and to enjoy what we have. Because we got a lot of history here for them to see.
The Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst is an extension of the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame. So we sponsor it and support it, advertise it, and promote it. And Dr. Jim Brewer founded this organization almost 25 years ago.
After I kind of retired, I had this idea. So I got a group of college professors and musicians together, and I had this idea. I said, why can't we start a Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame? And everyone in the meeting said, yeah, go ahead. It's been a tiger by the tail ever since. Yeah, go ahead. Not we'll do it with you, but go ahead. If you want to do that, go ahead.
Dr. Brewer first started out having a place where there was memorabilia housed, and it was out at the Jackson International Airport. But they were going to renovate out there, and so we moved out of there, and he opened the Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst.
When I moved to Hazelhurst, I recognized that the train depot here, historic depot, by the way, was empty other than some local items. So I contacted the city council, and they agreed to have a music museum. So as part of the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame, we established the Mississippi Music Museum in Hazelhurst. And all of the memorabilia that we had in storage, we put here, all that we could.
It is a small museum, and when you drive up, you think, wow, it's probably not going to be that cool. And you go in, it's like, oh my word, there's so much stuff to look at. You could spend several hours there and not see everything. And everything that he has in there has been donated.
We've never purchased anything for the museum. So everything that we have is a voluntary gift. And without that, we couldn't operate.
A real important part of the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame mission is to educate. So that's not just to educate kids, but it's to educate adults. Far too many Mississippians are not fully aware of the place that they were born in and how important that is to the world as far as music goes.
And one of the reasons for this museum is to let people know the heritage and the history of those famous musicians that are not necessarily household names. There's a story behind each musician. We've got so many of them. Who knows of the Black Swan, for example? The Black Swan was Elizabeth Greenfield. She was an ex-slave, and she was sent to England to sing for Queen Victoria. And here's an ex-slave called the Black Swan. Very few people know it. It's that kind of thing that we want to educate individuals about.
This music museum is going to help our children to learn about music. And I'm very honored to have Dr. Brewer working on this music museum. We thank God for him. All of this is because of him. Would not be for Dr. Brewer, this would not have happened. And we thank God for Dr. Brewer.
He's never taken any pay to do this, to execute this dream and this mission of his. And so I fully believe none of this would exist. The Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame would not exist if it had not been for Dr. Jim Brewer and his passion.
Back in 1995, we started this journey, and I think that's hopefully my legacy, is that you can be proud of Mississippi for one thing. At least you can be proud of Mississippi for its music, because it's had a worldwide effect. So that would be my legacy, is to let people know what a significant thing that is for our state. Can you think of another thing from Mississippi that is more popular, more well-known, more positive than our music? I can't think of another thing.
Well, our last stop is up in the middle of the Mississippi Delta. We're going to Leland, to a museum that houses a lot of memorabilia from one of Mississippi's favorite pastimes, and also recognizes a lot of people who shared that pastime over the years. We're heading for the Wildlife Heritage Museum.
Mississippi has one of the highest populations of hunters and fishermen and outdoor lovers in any other state. And it's something that whole families do together. I mean, Mississippi offers a literal wealth of outdoor opportunities. And this museum tells a little bit about all of them.
June of 2018, we were a year old, and we've got a long ways to go, and we're just excited about what's happening with the Wildlife Museum and helping preserve a building in downtown Leland that would have fallen in had it not been for the vision of the organization that we're a part of.
Canoes like this. And they took a cypress log and they lit fires on top of the log and burned the log, burned the wood. I got to realizing that we had Paul Elias in the National Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. We had people like Garland Pretty in the Field Trial Hall of Fame for, quail dogs and bird hunters. And, we had people, Preston Pittman and Cuz Strickland and Toxie Hayes in the National Outdoor Hall of Fame. None of these people had been honored in their own state. So we started the Mississippi Outdoor Hall of Fame, and a part of the museum is dedicated to the people that love the outdoors and have dedicated their life, Mississippi residents that have dedicated their lives to the great outdoors. So.
I'll be right back. What? No wonder. Diving water.
Billy Johnson was the one who said it needs to be here, and he's the one that got it done. And I was amazed when I first started looking into it that the state of Mississippi did not have an official wildlife museum and outdoor hall of fame. I couldn't believe it because it's such a huge pastime and hobby and interest to so many people throughout the state, and so many people outside of Mississippi come here for the hunting and fishing because it's so amazing. So I couldn't believe we didn't have a facility like this already, and then we didn't have anything that honored the people who made hunting and fishing what it is today. So it just worked out, and when we talked to our legislators about having it here, they agreed. They said, well, why not Leland? So here it is.
We needed a place where future generations could learn about the way hunting and fishing and enjoying the great outdoors evolved in our state. The mission statement of the Mississippi Wildlife Heritage Foundation that runs the museum is to preserve the history, heritage, and traditions of hunting and fishing in the great outdoors in Mississippi, to honor the people that have been a part of it, and to educate the public of the vast natural resources of our great state. And this museum does it all. So, if you come, plan on being here in a while, because it kind of grabs you and takes you, through this journey that our state has been on since people first started coming here, to live, and they needed food to survive.
Well, we have visitors from all over the state to come, and everybody that comes is just in awe. They can't believe that we have this, and this is a state museum for the state of Mississippi. Governor Bryant signed the law that made this the Wildlife Museum for the state of Mississippi, and it's kind of a hidden jewel in Mississippi. The people that have come have been really impressed, and then we have a lot of young children and older people who come that enjoy it. It seems like they enjoy it more than younger folks.
The history wasn't being preserved, and the stories needed to be told, and it needed to be passed down from generation to generation, and that's what Billy does best. He's a great storyteller, and he's a great visionary, and he knows how to pull together a group of people to make something happen.
Until you see a sunrise on Lake Washington and a sunset on the Mississippi River, you ain't been to Mississippi. It's just being out there and being a part of it. It's what living in Mississippi is all about.
Well, that's all the time we have for this show. But if you'd like information about anything you've seen, contact us at mpbonline.org/Mississippi Roads. And make sure you like our Mississippi Public Broadcasting Facebook page. And check out our Mississippi Roads Facebook page, too. Till next time, I'm Walt Grayson. I'll be seeing you on Mississippi Roads.
Down
Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Mississippi Roads is made possible in part by the generous support of viewers like you. Thank you.